Hello and welcome to DTC Podcast. I'm Eric Dyck. Today we're going down the AI rabbit hole with Trestle.co's founder and CEO John Chao. Since Chat GPT came out, he's been hyper-focused on integrating NLP functionality into every aspect of his business. He sees AI and Chat GPT specifically as a pivotal turning point in the history of commerce, where brands who learn to embrace and maximize its potential will out-evolve those who don't. And he's joining the DTC Podcast to teach us exactly how brands can take maximum advantage. Listen, and you'll learn the 6-step create method for prompt engineering, a framework that can help you turn Chat GPT from a novelty into a contributing member of your team capable of handling mountains of grunt work that you don't have time for. You'll hear the hidden value of AI hallucinations and how they can bust you out of blind spots. You'll also hear how Trestle's newly launched Filter GPT allows you to use natural language to create endlessly complex segments in seconds, as well as John's plans for a fully automated marketing calendar flywheel watched over by a benevolent, ever-evolving AI co-pilot. And of course, I'm going to talk about AI butlers if given half a chance. The future is bright. On with the show.
Structure your prompts in a way that allows ChatGPT to respond in a very concise, sort of succinct way. We call it create, basically a 6-step process to creating the different prompts that people use. The 6 steps are contextualize, give it a role, express very clear instructions of what you need to do. Sometimes you need to put things in square brackets and say, you have to answer in the exact same way. Ask for reasoning, try for different variations, and then evaluate and refine your prompts. And this is something that we've seen work really well for ourselves by just giving the right information, giving the right set of instructions to ChatGPT so you can get consistent, good answers that you can rely on for specific tasks.
John, welcome to the DTC Podcast. You're an e-commerce and SaaS entrepreneur with an obsession with ChatGPT, NLP, and prompt engineering. You're a real triple threat in this space. So you booked a podcast to come on to just sort of talk about the way that you see the opportunity for marketers and entrepreneurs with AI right now. So let's get into it. What are you seeing? What's your big focus these days with AI?
Well, ever since sort of November 30th, right, ChatGPT sort of launched, it blew my mind, right? And I think it's the same for many people, but we immediately started testing ChatGPT and started sort of signing up for Plus whenever as soon as it was available, because really it was just so amazing, right? To me, it was kind of like the internet is the second coming of the internet, right? It's that's kind of how the level of shock it was to me. It was just it was so good, and we oriented our entire company to start saying, hey, we got to get in on this. We have to learn about these new technology, because I think that people, it will become commonplace, right? It'll be turning on your faucet and drinking water. That's what AI is going to feel like these days, right? And so the people who get a hang of it, who work through the growing pains, are likely going to enjoy outsized advantage, right? And so that's my first experience. Was just we have to jump in on this. And so for the last 5 months, we've been basically playing with ChatGPT and OpenAI, so for ourselves and also for our product.
And the pressure is there. It's funny you say playing, and that when on the one side we're talking about there is a pressure to find ways to integrate AI into your business, and the way you alleviate that is by playing with it, which is interesting. It's an interesting time we find ourselves in. But I think it's people talk about, oh, is AI going to steal our jobs, or I don't think that, or replace us or anything like that. I don't think that's really the concern right now. I think it really is just about the brands and the businesses that are able to get the huge productivity gains that you're able to get through AI, and those that don't. And over time, there's going to be a real disparity between those brands, likely.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm with you. I don't think AI is here to replace us. I think when Satya Nadella and Microsoft puts it, it's basically just to sort of unlock productivity, right? They've positioned the first sort of AI experience we had that were really good is basically with the Copilot for GitHub, helping you complete code, and that's really what it is. They've repositioned a lot of these AI services as a Copilot, and so there's Copilot for Word, Copilot for presentations, different things like that, and we've been thinking about like what would Copilot for marketing do, and so that's kind of where we spend a lot of our energy on.
Give me an example. Like how are you seeing it used, or how is your team using it right now in as e-commerce marketers?
So as a team, like for ourselves, obviously we use ChatGPT a lot to create prompt engineering and actually get useful responses for the usual stuff, right? Like for marketing, for sales, for like summarizing. We use a lot of meetings and summaries, and those things really help productivity, and just how like trying to integrate OpenAI into our product and workflow, right? Like we played with like Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, Midjourney to create images. We use OpenAI and GPT 3.5, GPT 4. We tried to do like local fine tuning, as well as like different things like LangChain to improve the answers that we can get from OpenAI. And
what's
so,
that second piece there? LangChain?
LangChain, yeah. LangChain is I believe it was invested by Benchmark for about 50 million. It's probably going to be the next, it might already be $1 billion company at this point. But LangChain basically takes away, or helps you do training on sort of Chat GPT and give it context and memory without you having to go through the fine-tuning model, which is a little bit more technical and more expensive.
And I think that brings up a really good point.
Help.
I was talking about in the pre-interview about calling my brother out. My brother, Ian, works for Shopify, great guy, been there a long time. And he put out a post on LinkedIn the other day, and it was very obvious to me that it was written by ChatGPT. It was sort of a thought leadership post about work-life balance, and I'm like, I just texted him right away. I'm like, you totally just used ChatGPT for that, didn't you? And he's like, was it that obvious? And I think when we talk about fine-tuning or LangChain, like I think that's a big roadblock for people. Is like, how do I get this thing to actually sound like it's not out of a box? Because I think it's like the uncanny valley a little bit, in that people can really sense when something is really juiced up in sort of the out-of-the-box ChatGPT way.
Right.
You can really sense that. So give me, how are you guys sort of combating that when it comes to engineering your prompts?
Right. It's kind of like garbage in, garbage out, right? Like if you give it ChatGPT a super simple prompt, it's like, write me a marketing copy for July 4th, right? It'll spit out some pretty generic answers and stuff that you can kind of tell. And so we think the best way is actually not that complicated. It's basically just to structure your prompts in a way that allows ChatGPT to respond in a very concise, sort of succinct way, and then allow you to then tweak and refine it in the several steps, right? So we have this, we call it create. It's basically a 6-step process to creating the different prompts that people use, and the 6 steps are contextualize, give it a role. Give it really like express very clear instructions of what you need to do. Sometimes you need to put things in square brackets and say like you have to answer in the exact same way. Ask for reasoning, try for different variations, and then evaluate and refine your prompts. We have this. We actually put together this really handy guide that people can actually download. We call it like the ChatGPT cheat sheet, the create cheat sheet. And for people to, with actual examples that people can try to just type into ChatGPT. And this is something that we've seen work really well for ourselves by just like giving the right information, giving the right set of instructions to ChatGPT, so you can get sort of consistent, good answers that you can rely on for specific tasks.
I think that's just a super valid point. Whenever you're having a session with ChatGPT, it's easy to think of it as a one-off. Like put something in, boom, get your answer. But you really have to think of it more as like a session, where you are linking ideas together and making it know what's important as well. Like putting your context in. So let's go over it a little bit. So create. Start with context. That's where you're sort of telling it like here's the whole situation. Here's what your role is. Here's who you're speaking to. I find as well, right? Here's the audience that you're speaking to. What was E?
E is basically give it like very explicit instructions. It's like, so an example of like the first one would be like, the name of your company, and what is the context of what you're trying to create, and what is the objective. For example, for example, you're trying to create. If we go to one of the actual examples, is like I'm an outdoors brand. I want to promote and run a July 4th campaign. That could be the context, right? And then the role is basically like what role do I want the ChatGPT to play, right? So I usually say like, hey, you're the CMO, or you're the VP of marketing, you're the marketing specialist at my company. You're really good at like talking to our customers. The tone is very important as well. Like you have like all AI tools, like you have to very explicitly say like what kind of tone and what kind of communication style it has. And so for July 4th, you could say like, you want to be community oriented, you want to be very exciting, patriotic, specifically for that holiday. Yeah.
Very cool. I think this could help a lot of people just, thinking about how to structure their prompts to get the best results. What are some examples? Can you give some examples in your business that you've used AI to kind of, it's given you insight into things that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten?
For sure. Yeah. So one of the things about prompts is like, it's basically like the more work you put on it, the better it gets, right? And so like this really got us to think like, well, how can we better integrate sort of OpenAI services into our own product as well? And so you see a lot of mega prompts, right? Like on Twitter, you see a lot of people actually sharing different types of mega prompts, and we've been playing with like the idea of like, so our mission is to simplify personalization and help marketers be data-driven effortlessly. That's always been our mission since day one. And so when we saw OpenAI, it's really just sort of like unlocked a huge sort of area of what's possible to us in terms of like segmentation, in terms of like campaign creation. And so the first thing we tried to do was like, just based on like actual user feedback and use cases, right? Like we have a chat box, from Intercom, people can come in and people can type in to get some help to create different segments, right? So one of the biggest thing with people see is like they type in like, hey, can you help me find customers who bought 3 or more times in the last year and have not come back in the last 90 days or 60 days? And so they tell us exactly what they want to create, and that's the segment. And so we thought, well, okay, now we have an opportunity to create segmentation using natural language. And so we called it Filter GPT, and it's actually just launched this week already. And so you can actually literally just say, like, hey, I want to find people who bought this product. I want to find first-time customers. I want to find repeat customers. Just type into the chat box. It's connected to OpenAI, and it's also we teach it about our filter options and all the data that we have. And then it'll basically like return a made segment for you that you can apply, which is it's really interesting.
I want all the Bobs whose birthdays are in February. just speak it, type it, and it'll go right. Search your database for what you want. You know what I mean? It's wild to think about where that leads, right? Where if you can really make segments that simply, the next thing I guess is figuring out how to get ChatGPT to make its own segments, and then its own
exactly.
creatives based on conversion numbers, right?
And it's kind of already doing it. You know how like AI, we talk about AI having hallucinations, right? Sometimes making stuff up. In this case, it actually helped us actually refine our product, because what happened was one of the prompts that we were testing was just kind of like purchased within a certain time period, right? Like the example that I just provided. It actually showed us something. Chat GPT actually hallucinated and made up a filter that didn't exist, which is like ordered within time range. And we looked at our filters like, like we have orders, we have time range, but it wasn't specifically created for a time window. And so it actually instructed our engineers to actually fill the gap and actually create a couple of new filters because of this use case, because Filter GPT was coming up with examples of how to filter, and we just actually added them. It was beautiful.
That if you think about it, recency is going to be the hottest iron in terms of getting people potentially buying again. That's Super interesting. And so what did you feed it in order to get it to hallucinate that like added value there? Was that essentially your data set, your client's data set essentially, and it you told it what the parameters were, but that we say hallucinated, but maybe it was just like, hey, you're missing this, bud. Like maybe it wasn't hallucination, it was more just like, inspiration.
Absolutely, right? It's I think that because the large language models basically reads just a ton, like 700 billion whatever parameters in all these texts, right? And so there absolutely could be a case where it has read different types of SQL prompts or other types of filters, and it just probabilistically come up with these things that it has seen in the past, right? And so the way we're using, like we use multiple ways to actually create our prompts and for our product production. We test different things, but in this case, we give it a bunch of context. Like we also have a mega prompt that is sort of baked in the back end when you're typing it. So we would break down your answer into these instructions, and then we tell ChatGPT what are the options, right? Like we tell it, like here are like the 50 different attributes that you have available to create the filters for, and that's what it tries to do, right? It'll try to find the most reasonable one. And we asked it to give us the reasoning for this, and so we can see on the back end, so we could like actually try to tune it down the line. But the opportunity with this is like, for example, like one of the things that everyone wants to know is like, what are other people creating, right? And so we actually have a library of segments that people are pre-built, and we tell people which ones are being applied, which filters are popular, and that's kind of the same idea. Like if you could use AI to kind of help you figure out and uncover, hey, like if I connected my store to ChatGPT and my email services, what segments should I be creating? What campaigns should I be running? Right? We have kind of that data infrastructure in place to help AI sort of be the data scientist, be the assistant that can help you like prompt you to do actually these things. And so that's like a really exciting area for us.
And then, so what you're doing, like you're working on the API then, and your product, and it's just interesting. You can productize and integrate ChatGPT just by giving it really good prompts. Like how much development is happening or how much of it is natural language, no code to like full no code, and how much of it is actual development in order to build on top of ChatGPT?
Both, I would say. Like it depends on what you need, right? For example, if you're looking for simple things, right? Like it's absolutely mega prompts. These things work well, but to actually interact with your product or interact with your data, we have to do a bunch of like setups, if you will, right? Like you want to make sure that, for example, you're keeping the data. Privacy is really important. You don't want to give away your entire company data to ChatGPT per se, because then this one of the things that people maybe don't necessarily think about is that you have to set in OpenAI the options like, hey, don't preserve chat history or don't save the context of our sessions, because you could be giving away information that are proprietary or maybe privacy related stuff to a large language model, which then gets used to train stuff, right? And so that is an area that you have to be very, very diligent and very, very careful and just be very responsible for. And so we do have to take that into all these productions into place. And so that's number one. Number two is like there are also a ton of different technology being developed sort of every day. It's really hard to keep up sometimes, but we try our best. But one thing that we've seen, people have a lot of community sort of following a fervor for is basically like stuff like LangChain, right? And so that requires coding, requires sort of a bit more knowledge, and sort of a lot of test and trial and errors to actually integrate. That's sort of like on our outside. On our inside, on how to make our product more intuitive, we're also just experimenting with different ways, right? It's like one of the things I think people talk about AI now, kind of they relate to basically like a chat interface somewhere like where you can actually type it in. But I've seen one of the apps that we really love is called Gamma.app. Gamma.app helps you make presentations with the AI. It is one of the products we love to use as well. And it's like a really ingenious UI design. Like on the right side, it has a prompt and it gives you things like, hey, what would you like to do today? Create a presentation, create a doc, create a landing page. And then it helps you pick the outline. Once you have the outline, it generates an entire sort of presentation. We think that is like a really simple and educational way to help people actually do it for the first time. Because once you do it a couple of times, you really get a hang of it. And that's with these shortcuts. I think it's beautiful. Like it's just a way to prompt on the next thing you want to do. Because sometimes you don't know what to type into the chat box.
Super cool. So walk us through a little bit about your vision for Trestle segments in a year's time, or who knows, 6 months, 3 months time at this point with the way things accelerate. But so already, you've launched Filter GPT, which allows people to use natural language to dictate as many segments as they want from their list. And then have you launched the library yet? The library of sort of like democratizing
Yes.
prompts so that everyone can get access, not to your data, of course, but just to the different structures and what people are using. It'd be cool to see like rising in filters, or like filters that people are looking at more, or some sort of way for the cool, the most valuable filters to rise to the top. Where does this go? We alluded to it a little bit before, where we're like, okay, can you literally have a really small segments of just like really dynamic information being created with Chat GPT? Yeah, where does your mind go to what Trestle segments looks like in a year?
I think it's marketing co-pilot, right? Like as we kind of talked about in the beginning, it's just like if you have access, if you could connect your store to ChatGPT, right, and you could connect all your marketing channels and give it the valuable information about engagement, about repeat customer purchases, about who's purchasing my product at which times, which we are kind of the conduit, right? Like we're the data hub that actually takes that into account, create the data models, create a different, and model out all the different interactions, right? And so, right now, if you go into ChatGPT, you can't send emails. You can't ask it to like figure everything out and send an email for you, right? But what if it could, right? That's kind of like the beginning of our thinking here. It's like, what if you could actually have an AI assistant that understands your data, that could help you figure out which segments to target, that can help you create campaigns that are slightly varied by all the different segments that it should target. Figure out which campaigns to monetize, and figure out which campaigns to send. That's kind of our vision here. It's just like, can we do a few shot campaign creation to really simplify the level of effort that marketers need to go through to create these segments? Because that's kind of the bottleneck today. Like if I'm talking to, we work with like solopreneurs, we work with small teams, SMBs, 1 million, 5 million, 10 million to 50 million brands. A lot of times, bandwidth is absolutely an issue, right? Like everyone knows that they should be, optimizing and segmenting their campaigns and their lists, but they don't end up going to it. They don't end up doing it because it feels like going to the gym. It's like, I know it helps me get healthier, but like, when do I find time to do this?
Yes.
This is where I think AI can really unlock a lot of that productivity, and that's kind of where we see ourselves going.
It can do that grunt work. Even I've talked about it a few times
Yes.
on the podcast, but just coming up with your customer avatars from reviews or whatever, like you could sit down and do that. You could spend a half day and really compile that, and there'd be a lot of value. But when you can get 80-90% of the way there in 10 seconds, it's going to create an advantage for the brands that are able to really dial that in and go past the surface when it comes to engineering their prompts.
Absolutely. This is the thing. Like you have to be, you just kind of keep not just dip your toes, but like really just get in there, really, and start playing with it. Because I absolutely believe that it's a game changer. Everybody, large companies, small companies, everybody has a race to sort of like integrate OpenAI right now. And there's going to be some amazing service that's going to be available for either, free or very low cost, right? Because it's absolutely commoditized the entire industry here, and that's kind of where we really think, when you think about it, like as a data scientist myself, even interacting with data, sometimes it's not that easy, right? I gotta think, right? But what if you could have, your data science AI assistant that you could work with, that would uncover these things for you, right? So instead of like you have to do the work, you have to do a lot of their insights and kind of discovery, have the prompts baked into the system, and then ask it to give you some ideas, right? Ask it to give you some campaign suggestions. Light up my calendar for July. Which campaign should I target? And which segment should I target? When should I create these campaigns? Maybe even generate 80% of it, right? I think that's absolutely something that would make a small marketing team enjoy the benefits of like AI and large tech at a very like fractional cost, like without having to build out like entire data teams or buy like CDPs and all these things, and just kind of be available, make it less effort.
So how does it work? Yeah, like back to our original analogy of electricity going from something that maybe the street lights had it to something that's in every person's home at the flip of a switch, right? It's going from dial up and chat groups in the early days of the internet to the Wi-Fi being everywhere, and that's the process that we're in right now. What's so interesting to me is how sort of decentralized it feels to, even though OpenAI is no longer a fully open company, I guess, right? But it still feels like there's so many people on a level playing field right now with it. It seems like it feels like a great race.
I often think that, go back to what Toby, Shopify CEO says, is like, make the hard things easier and make the important things possible, and make commerce creative, right? Like, I think I really love the way he put it, because that's kind of what we're trying to do with software. Like, everyone's trying to do that with software. And so really trying to design something that from the bottom up that works for a marketer, works for D2C brands. That's what we think is the value, because like there's so much great products that needs to be sort of seen and introduced to the world, and we want to kind of be that, the air beneath their wings, so to speak, right? Like, we want to lift them up. They don't have time to figure out all this, like, and there's so much noise out there, right? Like, there's like a bunch of kind of noise around the space because everybody is trying to do something. People are trying to charge for prompts. I'm not so sure if that's a good idea. I feel like things will just become just really like water. It should be just available to a lot of people. And so like, that's kind of our job. We want to make sure like we can integrate some of these cutting edge technologies, make it easier for users to leverage, especially around marketing. And so like it needs to be accessible, but at the same time you have to put in the work.
Yeah, or you get AI to do it when you can. Like, back to your point about segments, it's like when you create a segment and a messaging line to a segment, it's like, great, you did it, but now it's like you have to maintain it, or you have to do it. Like, the more segments you create in the traditional world, like the more work you create for yourself. But if you're able to create a segmentation, and then you also have to keep track of, like, obviously the overall message saturation rate, and making sure that even if you're doing all this hyper segmentation, you're still getting the large group and you're not burning them out. But in a perfect world, like, AI keeps track of that. And if you're building a system for how to think about your overall customer life cycle, it requires inputs and tweaking here and there, but it's something that would run on itself and not be hyper complex like it would be if it was manual, obviously.
This is like a very interesting area for us. Like, we're actually looking, we're building a calendar view, which will be like a campaign planning AI. There's a couple of AIs we're playing with, basically the filter GPT, campaign GPT, and then reporting GPT. And those are the kind of the three areas we think are sort of core to the marketing operations, right? And so campaign GPT, what you think about is like with the calendar view, really to sort of light up the calendar like a Christmas tree. Like, think about all the different things that you have done in the last year, right? Like ghost mode from Mario Kart. Like, if you can see how you did it last year and see what hundreds of other brands have done sort of in the past, what are the hot zones for campaigns? What campaigns should I be creating this month? Which segments to target, and then sort of like monitor, for example, days on deal or level of discount that is being leveraged that is suitable for your brand, right? Like, it could absolutely learn about how you've been creating these prompts, feed it, brand assets to then be able to like create a lot of these campaigns down the line. I think that's what we need to be, 6 months, a year down the line. It absolutely will get there. And I feel like that's really exciting. It's like, like these things would not be possible, unless you were a huge company like LinkedIn, where I worked before. But now all these things are sort of at just beyond reach right now, but I think will become reachable very, very soon.
I wonder if at that point campaigns, if brands will be as open to being as open and democratic with sharing their campaigns. And data, your last piece will be the one they'll be least likely to want to share. But filters, I could see being no problem. Everyone, everyone's open when it comes to campaigns. Just because you might have competitors and you want to stand out in the inbox. So if you've got unique ideas for campaigns and things like that, it may not be things that people share as much. What are your thoughts on that?
You look at things like, for example, really good emails or mail.com, they are already actually getting everyone's campaigns, or like at least a large percentage of.
Yeah, I guess so. That's
brands.
true. Just set up an inbox and subscribe.
And you can, right? Like you absolutely could subscribe to 100,000 brands and receive. So a lot of campaign emails, I think, are basically public, right? At this point, and so it's really about just prompting you. Like I think I look at the grunt work as in, like, hey, like we're gonna put the big rocks in, we're gonna fill up the rest of it with sand and water, but just to help marketers be thinking in that space, right? But like human creativity is still sort of unbeatable. Like the AI isn't going to replace you because they're not going to see the unknown, right? Like you as a human, we're going to constantly be exploring and doing things sort of into the future and think about what's possible. And so it gets you 80% of the way there. You're going to have to basically still take it all the way, right? You're going to think about what's best for your brand, what is best for, for what's upcoming. You can anticipate these trends and make it creative. And so I think that's where the magic is.
That just made me have a really interesting idea about just about how it's like, we're always asked to live in the present kind of thing, but so much we try to keep track of so much stuff. So maybe this will help us be more present as people and forward thinking, where we can just leave the past to AI. The AI can help us categorize things, and I've talked about it probably 10 times on this podcast, but the AI butler, I really think that's where we're going. You mentioned it as the co-pilot, this idea that you'd have an AI that has access to your data in a way that you don't. I could pour over all my bank records, I could pour over all this data, my medical records, all of this stuff, my health records. I could spend hours doing that, or you could get AI to, like, you could put in some inputs about what you want in your life, and the AI could maximize across all of these different data points, like the right actions, so that's the next $1 trillion idea, AI butlers. Heard it here first.
I love it. A lot of that will probably get built. So I would I love to see that happening. People are already doing schedulers, meetings, booking people's time automatically, figuring out who needs to be where, and answering your emails. A bunch of things are sort of like it's just like being launched today, and we'll see which ones stick. Sort of remains in a couple of months, but I do think that idea is there. Like, it's just for different things, different places, you're gonna need a different AI, and so yeah, AI butler.
AI butler's coming. But to put you on the spot, we didn't even talk about this in the premiere, but I'm wondering, do you have any suggestions for us as a media company for the ways that you think might be a smart way to be thinking about AI? Like, already I came up with some questions ahead of time, based on our pre-interview transcript, and I do a lot of summarization and things like that with it currently. But do you have any other insights for a way that a media company like D2C could be using AI?
I think one of the things, like, it's like a knowledge, like there's so much knowledge sort of contained in all the DTC podcasts and newsletters, right? And so one of the things is like, you see people creating like a Steve Jobs AI, for example, like it'll just talk like Steve Jobs. But what if you could have a like the meta marketer, or like a D2C,
yeah. I'd just be there beside you, be your co-pilot, being like,
yeah. It'd be like, just tell me, what are some interesting things that have been sharing around AI, and it'll really index, for example, all the different podcasts, using transcriptions, and maybe even help you to sort of find that specific space, the moment in time, and you can actually view some of these content, right? Because it'd be hard to search through and browse hundreds of episodes.
Yeah.
But
show me a clip on product market fit. Show me a clip on TikTok optimization. Show me a clip on.
Right.
Yeah. That's super interesting.
The keyword highlight reel.
We'll have to connect offline about how, like, what actually goes into that. I think you alluded to it a little bit when it comes to how you've developed the products that you're building, but let's save that for a future podcast. Like, for now, I just want to help contextualize for people, like, before when we talked filtered, you've just launched Filter GPT, which I'm really excited about. How do people get access to that? If people want to start playing around with NLP and sort of like join you on this journey for like an e-commerce co-pilot, how do they do that right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they can find us on the Shopify app listing page, apps.shopify.com/segments. And we also have a 14-day free trial. I'll be there. Our data team will be there to help you like answer any questions. Yeah, that's kind of the best way to try it out.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's exciting that it's launched. And then also we'll just make sure that we throw the link to the create method so that your team and yourself can get a good look at how to start creating higher value prompts that get the job done. We're actually going to do a little live walkthrough on how we're going to build some segments using NLP here. Can you walk us through how this is going to work?
Yeah, so this is, we call it Filter GPT, but it's basically a chat box you can type into that basically will translate your queries into actual segments. These are also, there's these quick filters you can actually use to a simple quick prompts. So for example, customers who place at least one order, then what they'll do is they'll translate, use OpenAI to actually translate this into a filter for you, right? So in this case, this is customers who bought lifetime one order. But if you want to find, for example, repeat customers who haven't bought this year, right? This is very, very colloquial, very sort of like something that I would say, just type it in. OpenAI is going to figure out what this means and how to then trigger the segments in our platform. So it is still thinking.
Anyone who's used Chat GPT, it takes a minute, right? Like when you're using the web browsing version, it's got to think.
Right. Yeah. So what it created this two filters. One is total orders is 0 this year, right? So it figured out that this year is January 1st to June 19th, and it has repeat customers who haven't bought, so they have already last ordered, but more than 169 days ago, right? So that's an example of something that like you would maybe not think about the same way to construct these set of filters when you're building the segment, but the AI is smart enough to figure out like which ones to trigger, like what is the most efficient way and most accurate way to actually reflect what you're asking for it. And so like maybe if like I want to do with lifetime spend over $100, you can keep basically iterating on the different prompts and until you get something that you like, and you then save it, right? So this is like, I think it's way easier to interact with the different available options in our platform, which largely built from Shopify, from our proprietary data models. But it's actually, I feel like it's actually way more efficient and accurate to do it this way, because they just figured out that you need to add a total spend filter, right? But as a first time or frequent market, maybe you use it for the first time, you don't know all the different options. This is a much easier way to do it.
Super cool. Yeah. And you can just see where it leads to with Campaign GPT eventually as well, right?
Yeah. So I encourage you guys to give it a try and just to experience it for yourself. Don't stop there and kind of continue on to ChatGPT and do all the different things and try to be more productive with AI.
Nice, man. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on.
Always having fun talking about data and AI. So thanks, Eric, for having me on the show.
Yeah, we'll keep in touch just because we need AI correspondents into this brave new world. So good to have you.
Yeah, anytime.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can do that right now at direct-to-consumer, all one word.co. I'm Eric Dyck, and this has been the DTC Podcast. We'll see you next time.